Learning as a schusser for Shleim Filan Chai Baserach. We're starting the new parak, the second parak of Horayos. Little Masechta, but it still has 3 prakim. Look the Mishnah. Hayra Kayin Mashiach La'atzmi Shogig, also Shogig may be par. We're now moving on. Until now, we were talking about the Parhal Davar Shel Tzibur, when Bezdin makes a psak and the Yidden follow it with all the rules that we learned in the first parak. They bring what we call the Par Halam Davar Shel Tzibur. There's another par which is brought by the Kayin Mashiach, which is the Kayin Gadol. And this Kayin means Meshuach Hashem, and not that he's the Messiah. And the Kayin Gadol is also going to be similar to the Par Halam Davar. As we're going to see, the Gemara, the first blot is going to explain where we see it from. That is also, it comes from the psak of the Kayin Gadol. It means we're not talking about where the Kayin Gadol made a mistake, where he didn't realize what he was eating, or we're talking about where the Kayin Gadol made a psak. He said, for example, that chaylev is mutter, and then he went ahead and ate it. And on that, he brings the par Kayin Mashiach. Normally, a person who does a chait b'shaygig, he brings a kisba or a seira. He could choose from either a male or a female goat or a female young sheep. But a Kayin Gadol, he's going to bring, when he makes a hayra, he's going to bring a par Kayin Mashiach, and if he's going to do a shiggas maisa, I believe he's going to be potter. That's what I remember right now. So, Hayra Kayin Mashiach La'atzmai, if the Kayin Gadol did the process that would cause him to be mechoyev a par Kayin Mashiach, Shoygig v'asa Shoygig, maybe par. If he was a Shoygig, meaning he by mistake paskin incorrectly, if he paskins incorrectly on purpose, it's not really paskining incorrectly. That is, that's just not saying I'm not going to do what the Torah says. But he didn't do that. He made a mistake, and then b'shoygig, he followed what his heart told him, what he had decided, mistakenly, meaning that he still thought it was correct. The Gemara is going to say exactly what the chiddush of that is. That how is it possible for him to do it b'mezid if he paskin b'shoygig? So the Gemara, maybe par. He brings the par Kayin Mashiach. Shoygig v'asa mezid, or mezid v'asa shoygig, potter. If he was a shoygig on the psak, but what he did afterwards was with mezid, or mezid v'asa, vice versa. So then he's potter. He doesn't bring a carbon at all. He doesn't have the din of a shiggas maisa, that like a regular yachid, that he brings a kispa v'sira. His din of shoygig is to bring when he's a hayra b'shaygig, and also b'shaygig, hayra b'shaygig, and also b'shaygig, he brings the par Kayin Mashiach. Sheroz Kayin Mashiach la'atzmei hayra bezdin l'tzibur. The hayra of the Kayin Gadol that he makes for himself is compared to that of the bezdin l'tzibur, and the bezdin, when it makes a psak for the tzibur, if it's also mezid, hayra b'mezid and also shaygig, or hayra b'shaygig and also b'mezid, is not going to be any carbon regular chatas. So the same thing with the Kayin Gadol. The first question: Shaygig v'asa shaygig may be par. We said if it's a shaygig v'asa shaygig, he brings a par pshita. This is the general din of the Gemara. The Mishnah is not telling you what the pasuk tells you. The pasuk tells you that. I'm not sure exactly why it's pshita, because why the Mishnah can't tell you the din. Rashi says shaygig v'asa shaygig may be par pshita. The chihayra b'shaygig v'asa shaygig that is shaygig ma'alyo may be par carbon. This is the din of a par Kayin Mashiach. And for the Gemara, hacham amar Abaya, hacham mayaskinan kain shehayra, where the Kayin Gadol made a psak, the shachach me'ez the tam hayra, but he forgot the reason behind it. It means he knows. He says he has in his head that I looked into it, and chaylev is mutter to eat. And when the time that he eats it, he doesn't remember what his justification for saying chaylev is mutter. This Kohen Gadol is being very delinquent. He's being negligent, right? Let's say you would one day, you come up with a reason why Gzela is allowed. And then a week later, you go and steal, but you don't no longer remember the reason why Gzela is allowed. But you know good and well that generally the rule is you can't steal. So if you don't remember your justification for it and you follow your reasoning without remembering why you reason that way, that's almost like a mazid. If the Kohen Gadol decided that chaylev is mutter, he should, and he doesn't remember the reason, doesn't remember his explanation, he's basically doing it on purpose because he can't just write a note. I can eat chaylev from now on. He has to, in order for him to be a shogeg, he has to at least have some kind of incorrect justification.
He brings a par for that.
He's going to bring a par. No, he won't. One might say he shouldn't bring a par for that when he forgot the reason. So, Kamash Malan, he shouldn't be mechoyev at all because he's amazed. Kamash Malan, though, he still brings a par. That's still considered a shogeg, as long as he remembers. As long as it was originally a mistake, it still remains a mistake. Where does it come from? This general thing that the Kohen Gadol is going to be mechuyev in the Par Kohen Mashiach when it's a b'hayra, when it's not b'shigas ma'aser, but rather when he does it b'hayra. So we answer that we learn it out from the pasuk. The pasuk compares. It says by the Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Gadol will do a chait, and the pasuk pshat la'ashma sa'am is that he represents the tzibur, and he's doing a chait. It's a chait really for the whole tzibur. But we darshan la'ashma sa'am that he's doing a chait that relates to the Harei Mashiach Ketzibur. That we're saying that the shogeg of the Kohen Gadol is similar to the shogeg of the tzibur. Just like the tzibur has the din that they bring a par halam davar shel tzibur when there's hayras bezdin b'shogeg, and the ma'isa of the tzibur is b'shogeg. So to the Kohen Gadol, his hayra has to be b'shogeg and his ma'isa has to be b'shogeg. Correct the Gemara. What do we need this pasuk for? Like v'aloydinu, tzibur ma'isa mechal yachid, u'mashiach ma'isa mechal yachid. The tzibur, when the tzibur has a hayra, that bezdin brings we're going like Rav Meir, that the tzibur is the bezdin brings the carbon. They're excluded from the yachid. A yachid normally brings a kispo seira, and instead of the tzibur, when they do a chait all together with the hira of the bezdin, they bring a param davar shel tzibur. Or Mashiach ma'aser mechal yachid, and the Torah also excludes a Mashiach to bring a par. Matzi ren chayeven alal helam davar. So just like the tzibur, it's only chayev when bezdin paskin, and the tzibur did the ma'isa b'shogeg. Mashiach lechayev alal helam davar im shigas ma'isa. So we should say l'chayra. We could just learn it out from a mematzinu. Should be the same thing. Let's say that you learn out param davar shel tzibur. Obviously, you learn par kayim Mashiach, but param davar shel tzibur that it's only b'shigas. B'hayra and shigas ma'isa. Maybe I'll say the other direction. Maybe I'll learn, instead of learning out from Param Davar Shel Tzibur, I'll learn out the Kohen Mashiach from Michal Nasi Ma'aser Michal Yachid. A Nasi, there's also the carbon of the Nasi that he brings a seira. He's excluded from the klal, from the tzibur, from other people. Everyone else brings a kispu seira, but a nasi only brings a seira. That's his only option to bring as a chatas when he does a chait, and that's talking about a shigdus mais. It's not with a hayra. Just when the nasi does a chait, He's not necessarily a particular Talmud Chacham that we looked in for Hira. He's but he's the leader of the nation. He's the king. So he's different than other Yechidim. And Mashiach is Maitzim Michal Yachid. Ma Nasi maybe b'shigas Maisa b'lei helam davar. Af Mashiach maybe b'shigas Maisa b'lei helam davar. So Gemara is saying, why are we comparing the Parkai and the Mashiach, the Shigas of the Mashiach of the Kain Gadol to that of the Helam Davar Shel Tzibur? Let's rather compare it to the Nasi, and the Nasi is not with a Halamas Davar with a Hira of Bezdin, and then the Shgaga of the Shigas Maisa or Shigash. Yeah. So Gemara, Nira Lamidan. So which is it more like? Is the Kain Gadol more like the Nasi, or is it more like the Tzibur? Tzibur, a par. First of all, Tzibur brings a par, and the Kain Gadol also brings a par. Ve'ein maybe a Masham Tali. In addition, the Tzibur, the Param Davar Shel Tzibur, is not brought as an Asham Tali. If someone mistakenly, Asham Tali is brought with someone is not sure of whether he even did the Maisa that would be B'Shaigagasar. For example, there were two pieces of meat, and one was Chalev and one was Basar. And if the Bezdin had Paskin that Chalev is mutter, and he doesn't know which one he eats, he doesn't bring the Asham Tali on it. Mashiach, so Mashiach is similar to this. The par Mashiach also, the par Kai Mashiach is also a par, but maybe Asham Tali, it also is excluded from Asham Tali. The Gemara later on is going to say where we see that it's not. There's no Asham Tali on a par. It's basically a Xeris HaKasav, that there's no Asham Tali either on the Tzibur or the par. So Ma Tzibur ein Chayav al Helm Davar im Shigas Maisa. Mashiach le Chayav al Helm Davar im Shigas Maisa. So we should learn it out. The Kain Gadol from the Param Davar Shel Tzibur. Eklachel Darzu. Or maybe I'll go the other direction. Nasi maybe Seira b'Avodas Kechavim. The Nasi brings a Seira if he's over on Avodas Kechavim. There's an exception. All the dinim that we said, all the chatayis are different in the case of Avodas Kechavim. An individual who's over on Avodah Zara brings a Seira as opposed to a Kispa or Seira. Or maybe Asham Vadei. And also he brings a Asham Vadei, meaning part of the rules of a Chatas is if someone is over on certain Averis, which we've had the Asham Vadei. The Asham Mizu is where a person denies when he stole, or if he does Me'ilah, so he brings an Asham as opposed to the regular Chatas. So that applies to a Nasi. Mashiach maybe maybe Asham Vadei. And the Mashiach as well. When he's over on Avodah Zarah, he's going to bring the Sira, and he also is going to be liable to the Asham Vadai when he's over on a regular, when he's over on one of those Averis that bring Asham Vadai. So Ma Nasi maybe Shigas Maisa, Mashiach maybe Six Maisa. So maybe they should also be compared, the Gabi the Din, of being over B'Shigas Maisa, that the power Kayim Mashiach should be brought B'Shigas Maisa, just like the Nasi is over B'Shigas Maisa without the Hiras Bez. That's why. So right. So basically, the structure over here was, we said, where does it come from that we say you need a Hiras Bezin, or not Hira? You need a Hira of the Kain Gadol in order for him to be Machayev, the power Kain Mashiach. So we said at the beginning of the bride, we said because it says La'ash Masa'am, that it's compared to the Then we went back and forth saying maybe we should learn it out because it's similar to the Param Davar Shel Tzibur. That's where you should know it out from. Without the La'ash Masa'am, what do you need a pasuk for? We said no, maybe it's more. It could be equally diamond to the Sire, to the Nasi. So since we weren't able to come to a conclusion about whether it's more similar, whether the the Mashiach, the Kohen Gadol who does an Aveira, Shagig, is more similar to the Tzibur that does an Aveira Shagig, which is only Hayra, or more similar to the Nasi who does a Aveira Shagig, which is without Hayra. So we have to leave it that it comes from the pasuk, from the Ashma Sa'am, which tells you directly that you compare the Kohen Gadol who does a Shagig to a Param Dava Shal Tzibur, which is only with the Hayras Bezdin. So the Kohen Gadol also, he has to make, so to speak, a Hayrah for himself. He has to decide the halacha incorrectly and follow what he said. It has to be the same sort of shgaga with the Hayrah of the Kohen Gadol together with his incorrect Maisa.
So saying that the Nosik would not do a Chayra. It's not a job of a Nosik to Chayra, period.
I mean, I just stuck that in. I mean, the Kohen Gadol also doesn't really do Hayrah. So, but
I was wondering.
it was just a flourish, right? The Kohen Gadol also doesn't have to be. Well, we're going to see later on. The Kohen Gadol does have to be a Talmud Chacham in order for this to apply.
But
he has to be an equal Talmud Chacham to the head of the Bezdin. Which is, but I'm saying, I was just, in my mind, the Nasi has his position of being a Nasi has nothing to do with it's a king. It's a purely secular position. Kohen Gadol is not a secular position, and the Gemara later comes to the conclusion that Kohen Gadol has to be the biggest Talmud Chacham, the Gadol Hadar, in order for this then to apply that his Hayrah should be meaningful.
But it doesn't have to be a biggest Talmud Chacham to qualify to be a
Kohen Gadol, right? No. Yeah. Zok the Gemara. Be'ema matzibur hayra ba'asu achra b'hayrasa chayavin. Let's say, since we're saying that the Par Kayin Mashiach is compared to Par Helam Davashal Tzibur, that we're saying that it needs a Hayra and a Maisa. Let's say it's even more directly compared to the Tzibur, that when the Bezdin makes a Hayra, and other people do what Bezdin said, that you're going to bring the Par Helam Davar. Af Mashiach Shayr Vasu Achvar Rasa Yechayev. Maybe the Par Kayin Mashiach is brought, even if the Kohen Gadol makes a psak, and Joe Schmo on the street follows the psak of the Kohen Gadol, the Shaygig. Maybe then the Kohen Gadol will bring the Par Kayin Mashiach just like the Bezdin brings when they make a Hayra and other people follow it. When the Torah says the din of the Par Kayin Mashiach, it says al chatosa yasher chata. He only brings it for the chait that he did, and not for a chait that other did.
What was the Gemara trying to learn?
The Gemara, so the Mishnah made the assertion, right, that the Kohen Gadol, when he brings the Par Kayin Mashiach only when he himself paskin, let's say the chaylev is mutter, and then he ate the chaylev b'shegig.
So instead of bringing the chatas,
he has to bring the Par Kayin Mashiach. It's a whole different carbon. And then we said that we learned it out from a pasuk that because the Kohen Gadol, where do we know that it's with this? It has to be when he was made a hayra and he followed it. Why could it be a regular shidduch ma'isa? We just did something by mistake, right? He didn't realize it was chaylev. He take the chaylev instead of the kosher food. The Gemara, because he's compared to Par Helam Davashal Tzibur. We have it says the Ashma Sa'am tells you that the Kohen Gadol, it says that by Par Kayin Mashiach. So it's telling you that the Par Kayin Mashiach is similar to the Par Helam Davashal Tzibur. So the Gemara now is asking, let's say it follows even more closely Par Helam Davashal Tzibur, that even if someone else listens to what the Kohen Gadol paskin, the Kohen Gadol will have to bring the Par Helam Davashal Tzibur, Par Kayin Mashiach, just like the Par Helam Davashal Tzibur is brought when other people follow. The Gemara says, Al Chatosa Shechata tells you not like that. But now we're going back to the back and forth that we had said about whether the Par Kayin Mashiach is more similar to the Helam Davashal Tzibur or to the Nasi. So we said Mashiach b'par ve'ein maybe ashum tali. We said the Par Kayin Mashiach brings a par, which is uncontroversial. That's what the Torah says. And then we said he doesn't bring the ashum tali. Minole, they may be ashum tali. Where does it come from? What we just stated as a fact. Where does it come from? Because the Torah says the Gabi the Asham Tali that the Kayan will be mechaber al shigagosei shaga. Mishachatosei v'shigagosei shava. It's only on someone that the chatosei, meaning that what he did, and the shgaga are the same. Yatam Mashiach she'ein shigagosei v'chatos shava. D'chsev la'ashma sa'am, that he doesn't bring the same thing for whether it was that he doesn't bring the same thing for a where he does a regular shigas maisa. A shigas maisa, I keep forgetting this. I don't know why. I know I looked this. I saw this on Rashi before. I think the Kohen Gadol, when he does shigas maisa, brings a regular carbon, but when he does a hayra, I don't know. What does it say over there? Nobody says this. But in any case, he doesn't have the same din when he does a shigas maisa as he does.
Well, Rashi and Rashi Diksiv, unless I'm wrong about this, seems to be implying that a Kohen Mashiach, if he does a regular shkaga without a hira, doesn't bring a carbon at all.
Yeah, I think that's right. So he doesn't have the same din when he does a shigas maisa that he's potter. While if he does b'hayra, then he brings the pot. Yatsa Mashiach she'en shigasei v'chatos shav. D'chsev la'ashma sa'am. Horayos Mashiach katzibur la'ashma sa'am. That he's like the tzibur la'ashma sa'am, that he doesn't bring for shigas maisa, only for hayra. So that means that their din what when they do a shigas maisa, when they do hayra, are the same. We're saying that din. We're saying where do we know Asham Tali doesn't apply to Parkei Mashiach? It says by Asham Tali, that tells you it's only going to apply to someone or a situation where the shaygig b'hayra is the same as the shaygig with the shgaga with shigas maisa.
You bring a chatas when you would have been otherwise chayav of karas. You did by mistake, so you bring a chatas. When you bring an ashram tali,
bring asham tali when it's a certain type of shgaga, when the person doesn't know whether he was Iber B'Sheik. There are two pieces of meat in front of him. So we're saying Asham Tali is excluded from Parkei Mashiach because you can't say on that Shigasei v'chatasai Shava.
But it has to be chorus because then you love. You bring chatas. No?
No. It's
on karas.
only if it has chorus when it's done without hasra.
Shigasei shava. Someone who's chatas, meaning we did it by accident.
So let's see the Rashi. Minolei de Mashiach maybe Asham Tali. L'siv ba'Asham Tali v'chiper ha'kain shigasei shechata chadasei misha chatasei shigasei shava de'ene chav ad havi hakol b'shgagas ma'isa dehanu yachid. It has to be that it's all b'shgagas ma'isa. Yatam sheyesh chatasei shigasei ein shava de'ene chav el helam davar shigas ma'isa. Right, that he's only chayiv. He's not chayiv for a regular shigas ma'isa. He's only chayiv for hayra with a shgaga. D'chsev l'asham saram. Yas Mashiach she'en gasei v'chatas shava. D'chsev l'asham saram. Horayos Mashiach katzibur. I'm sorry. Yas Mashiach she'en gasei v'chatas shava. D'chsev l'asham saram. D'chsev l'asham saram. Horayos Mashiach katzibur l'asham saram. We said, and we continued, and we said, Mashiach is like the tzibur, is like the l'asham saram. Ad kam le'kamalei le'el Ad kam le'kamalei. In fact, the Gemara, how could you use la'ashma sa'am to tell you this? The Gemara is arguing that it's a circular reasoning. You're saying we were all using this to prove that Parkei and Mashiach is only going to is only where it's hayra and not where it's shigas maisa. But we're saying the reasoning of how we know that Asham Tali doesn't apply by Kai Mashiach is dependent on the fact that it's not b'shigas mais, it's only with hayra. So you can't use the factor that you're using as the reason to as part of your proof. So the Gemara, El Asham Kadi Nashba. We had given two reasons why Parkai and Mashiach is more similar to a Par Helm Davashal Tzibur as opposed to a Sar. One was that Ashram Tali doesn't apply to both the Nasi and the Kain Gadol. And I'm sorry, to the Parkai Mashiach and Tzibur. And the other thing was that they both bring a par. The par and the tzibur both bring a par. So we're really only left with the par, because this second argument, like we said, is a circular argument, and therefore the Gemara is essentially dropping it. It was just thrown in l'ravcha the milsa, because in the end they do come out to have that similarity, but ein hanami can't be used to prove the point. Zok the Mishnah. Oh, I really got to go. Zok the Mishnah. Hayr b'fnei atzmai, also b'fnei atzmai. The Kohen Gadol made the Hayra on his own, and he did it on his own. So what does that mean? Zakrashi Hayra Kohen Mashiach ma'asik going to Mayru betray Isure Bezdin b'chelev v'hu ba'avaydus kechav. Bezdin b'chelev v'hu ba'avaydus kechav. We talk. What is the case that the Kohen Gadol brings the pound of Tzibur? It's talking about where the Kohen Gadol made one Hayra. Because the Mishnah is trying to tell you a chiddush, like Rashi says. So it's telling you a chiddush that with the Kohen Gadol and the Bezdin were both made hayros at the same time, but they were two different hayros. Bezdin said chelev is mutter, and he said avodas kechavim is mutter. The hayr b'fnei atzai, b'skapeloi b'fnei atzmai. The Kohen Gadol is going to bring his own par kohen Mashiach. He won't be included in the Parham Davashal Tzibur. Hayre emat Tzibur v'asam men Tzibur. But if the Bezdin paskin that chelev is mutter, and the Kohen Gadol also paskin that chelev is mutter, and he did the same time that the whole Tzibur was doing, eating chelev, he also ate the chelev b'shaygig. Miskaper lo emat Tzibur. Then he doesn't have to bring a separate Parham Davar. Parkai Mashiach, he's Yaitza with the Param Davashal Tzibur from the Bezdin. She'ein Bezdin Chayav Nashiyar Levatal Mitzvahs L'Kayim Mitzvahs V'chein Mashiach. This is a very hard cheshbon to understand, but the Mishnah says that it's, since they're very similar, just like the Bezdin is going to be Chayiv only when they are mevatal part of a mitzvah, V'chein Mashiach, and similar thing, and the Kohen Gadol also is only b'chayev when he's moira on part of a mitzvah. So therefore, it makes sense that when they're so similar, it makes sense when the Kohen Gadol is over together with the tzibur, he's going to be included together with the tzibur. Let's see the Rashi on this, because niskapelem tzibur shehu miskapel b'shel bezin. He's going to be yaitza with the Paham Davashal Tzibur. Me'ma miskap b'shel bezdin imatzibur ki hayre imatzibur lefisha b'dvarim harbe shava Mashiach lebezdin. Since they're very similar, she'en bezdin chayav and carbon ashiyar levatal mitzvahs v'chein Mashiach. V'hayil v'hushvu Mashiach lebezdin. Since they're similar, helkach ki hayre imatzibur v'asem matzibur miskaper matzibur. Like Rashi's saying words, but I don't really understand why. Because they're similar, that means that the Kohen Gadol should be included with the din of the Param Davashal Tzibur. So he has his din, and they have their din. They're very similar. But what does that mean? That when he did a Avera together with them, that means he's included. I guess it means it's in a way it's duplicative, right? You don't double something. These are both parim. They're similar. They're both parim. They're similar. They're both brought for hayra and then shkaga. So why would you duplicate by making double the same, essentially what sounds like a similar carbon? That's all. That's the way I would have to understand it. Then the Mishnah continues. This is a separate din. There's also a special carbon brought when they're over b'avetz kechavim. That's also going to be when it's mevatel mitzvah and l'kayim mixes, where it's where they're not saying that all avodas kechavim is mutter, but rather they just said that hishtach avot avodas kechavim is mutter, for example. So that's Gemara. We know immediately. Where does this come from? The Tanur Rabban Hayre Matziv Asa Matziv Yachi Yevi Parla Asa V'Dinu. This is basically going to be the question. Where do we know that the Kohen Gadol has to have Hayra, a separate Hayra? So the Tanur Rabban Hayre Matziv Asa Matziv Yachi Yevi Parla Asa. Maybe he should bring his own par. V'Dinu. Nasi Maitzim Mechal Yachad. Mashiach Maitzim Mechal Yachad. The Nasi is excluded. The Nasi brings a different. He brings a seira as opposed to a kispa seira. Or Mashiach Maitzim Mechal Yachad. And the Kohen Gadol is also different than a regular Yachid who brings the Chat. Ma Nasi Chata B'fnei Atzmai, Mei B'fnei Atzmai, Chata Matzibah, Miskapalei Matzibah. I would say just like the Nasi, since when he doesn't have Eira on his own, he brings his own carbon. But if he was also included that the Bezdin made a psak and he followed the psak, he's going to be Yaitz with the Param Dav Shal Tzibur, because that has really nothing to do with the Nasi. He's not bringing. His chatas is a regular chatas, except for that he just brings a different carbon. So it's just he's going to get the same din as any other yid who doesn't have erah. Av Mashiach chatam ne'atzah mevnei atzah chatam mitzim iskapel ematziba loy ematziba loy zok tomorrow loy emat benos shechem iskapel loy ematziba b'yam b'kippurim. Then Mashiach she'em iskapel ematziba b'yam b'kippurim. Gemara says no, you can't compare the Kohen Gadol to the Nasi because the Nasi doesn't have any special din of how he's miskaper on Yom Kippur. He gets included with everyone else. But the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, he brings special kabbanos for his own kapara, and then there are other kabbanos that brought for the tzibur. Since he's already excluded in one way, he's treated differently than the rest of Klal Yisrael. Maybe he's also treated differently than the rest of Klal Yisrael, Lagabi, being included together with the Param Dav Tzibur. However, the same is Kabbalah Matzibah Yom Kippur. Yachol Yevi Parla Atzmai. Tamalad Me Achatas Yasher Chata. The Torah says Achatas. Okay, it's a Chata B'Fnei Atzmai, maybe B'Fnei Atzmai. Chata Matzibah is Kabbalah Im Atzibur. Since it says Al Chatas Yasher Chata, that's an extra limud to tell you that he brings his own chait. He brings his own carbon for what he was Chata. That it's only when he does the chait himself. That's when he brings the pound of Shal Tzibur, the Hakon Mashiach. But otherwise, he'll be included with the pound of Tzibur. Hechidam, what is this case? If we're talking about where the Kohen Gadol himself was the biggest Talmid Chacham, and Bezdin was not as great as him. Pshita, the Miskapa loy b'fnei atzmai. Haradol han lo v'loy klum. We have said before, right, that you have to have the biggest Talmid Chacham has to, I don't remember the word that we used for it, but we said that if they don't consult with the biggest Talmid Chacham, there's no din of Parhal and Davar Shel Tzibur, because they're almost like amazing. They didn't check, and therefore it's not considered a Hiras Bezdin. So if the Kohen Gadol was the biggest Talmid Chacham and they didn't ask him, then their psak is worthless. Then everyone has to bring a regular chatas. It doesn't have the din of Param Davar Shel Tzibur. And if Bezdin is Taka has the biggest Talmid Chacham by them, and the Kohen Gadol is not as big, why is he bring his own carbon? Again, he himself, if he doesn't, the Hayra, we're assuming that the Hayra of the Kohen Gadol has to be similar to the Hayra of the Bezdin, that it has to be that it was a real Hayra. And if he didn't consult with the biggest Talmid Chacham, then it's also a useless Hayra.
Even for himself.
Even for himself. Amar Rapapa can show you Muflayim Shneim. Rapapa says we're talking about where both of them were equally Talmidei Chacham. What is the case of where he did a chait on his own, and then he did it on his own, which Rashi had explained before. It's talking about where he made a psak on one thing, and Bezdin made a psak on a different thing. Hechidami. When is that case? The Yatzvi b'shnei mekaymis b'kamari b'trei suri. It's only talking about where the Bezdin was in a different place from him, and they're passing on two Hebrisum. But if they would be in the same place, that Bezdin could have heard about what he said and stopped him, then that wouldn't have it in that he was hired b'fnei atzmai. And this, if Bezdin is sitting there, if it's in the Sanhedrin, is in the same place that he is, the Kohen Gadol makes an incorrect psak, and they don't stop him, that's not considered that he was hired b'fnei atzmai. Amalei Rava, atu shnei mekayim is garben. Does it have to do where they are? Since they're passing on two separate things, it's a chata b'fnei atzmai. Okay, we're going to have to unfortunately stop over here.
Why would they do different things? Why did we that two different?
If Bezdin and he were both passing on the same topic,
Yes.
then it becomes a pound of a shel tzibur, like we said before.